And really, I'm just here to help facilitate and listen. But I want to make sure that specifically the concerns that many of you have expressed to me about homelessness in our area, which, let's just face it, has grown and has grown a lot, specifically at intersections, that we specifically talk about those areas and things we're doing so that you have a heads up. I haven't seen this presentation, so I'm not sure what's going to be said. But what I do want you to know is there's a group called the Continuum of Care, and they're the ones who receive the big HUD allocation. And that HUD allocation is then used to support Housing First initiatives, which have a whole range of different ways they're used. And the focus of that group is exclusively 100% Housing First. And many people in the industry here in Dallas will tell you that Housing First. Okay, please mute. Please mute. Will tell you that this is working and that we're making progress based on the point in time count. And what I want you to know is that the city council members who are not homeless professionals, although I have been a shelter director and served in other nonprofit and professionally and as a volunteer homeless activities, we see something totally different. And so professionals who are doing a once a year count that has been widely criticized as being inaccurate have a very different view than council members who live and drive in their districts every day, who hear from residents every day, who get the photos and the calls. And what we are all independently seeing is a very large increase in homelessness. So there's there's multiple different narratives happening. And with that, there's council members that have kind of come together to say, we need a different solution than what's been done. Now, I've been saying that from the beginning, but again, I come with very different experience than most of my colleagues because I literally worked in that industry and I care very deeply about it. But I also don't think there's only one solution, meaning just Housing First for all people. And what I saw in my experience at a transitional shelter was that different things were needed for different folks. So with that, let's go ahead and see this presentation. And after that, really, it's your time to ask questions. I would like to be able to, and Christine, you can help me on this, depending on what the presentation says, be able to speak specifically to encampments along Frankfurt, along Gibbons, along Timber Glen, Rosemead Park. Those are really our biggest hotspots, but there's lots of other little things. And you should just know there's 400 known homeless encampments in Dallas, and they are everywhere. There's no district that doesn't have them. So with that, let's go ahead and have Christine kick it off. Christine is the director of the Office of Homeless Solutions. I think Christine's been with the city for 3 years now. There's 6 presenters on here. And so I can see that Gloria Sandoval, who I believe, Gloria, you've been with Office of Homeless Solutions at least 3 or 4 years. Amanda, I think you've been there, I don't know how many years, quite a few. So there's quite a few people here with years of experience dealing with this issue. There's nobody on the call who doesn't know where Frankfurt and the Tollway is, which PS, Office of Homeless Solutions says they go out there every single day. I don't. You can clarify if that's true. But with that, I'm going to say, Christine, take it away.
Well, thank you so much, Council Member. I also know the Commissioner from District 12 is here tonight as well, our Citizen Homelessness Commissioner. So I just want to thank you guys for sharing the district with us tonight. I will also say we thought that District 10 was winning in terms of who has the most people year over year with about 25, and you guys just blew them out of the water. So congratulations. This is the largest group. And as council member said, I'm going to go ahead and go through this presentation. It's about 20 minutes. And then at the end, we will have room for Q&A. So as you have questions, please type them in the chat. If you're wanting information and for some reason you don't want to ask the question out loud, you're totally welcome to email us. We'll put our office emails in the chat as well. And we'll go through Q&A at the end, and we'll go until 8 p.m. So if for some reason we don't answer all the questions, we always get all of the questions and then we email them back to the council member with answers for distribution. We'll also go through some feedback in here. So if I can go to the next slide, please. So what we're talking about tonight, this is actually almost our last listening session. We've been doing this for a week and a half now. And what we do is we have an annual listening session that we do with communities, really as a formal touch point on whatever the topics for this year are. And so for this year, the topics are our 2024 bond program, the Give Responsibly campaign, and the Friends of OHS. In years past, it's been various tranches of money coming down from the federal government. Last year, or no, 2 years ago, excuse me, we used this time to really rebrand or update our 4-track strategy, which hadn't been updated since 2017. And so this year, these are the really big issues. I know Councilmember did speak to some specifics. Tonight, we're really here to look at the big picture issues. That doesn't mean that we don't have that information, so we'll get that to you. We are out at Frankfurt on the Tollway quite a bit, but those are things that we can definitely get into and get back to you. So for tonight, for this focus, let's go ahead and start. Next slide, thank you. So just for an introduction, OHS has been here since 2017 when various programs around the city for homelessness were brought into under one roof, as it were, and the Office of Homelessness was born. Homeless Solutions was born. That actually also came with a 4-track strategy. I just said we updated it in 2022, and that is our guiding policy. So that is a policy adopted by City Council. That is how we align all of our strategies with those 4 policies. 2024. Yes.
Christine, excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt. I see messages from guests who are saying they cannot see the presentation. I can see the presentation on the screen.
Yeah, let's take a minute to troubleshoot that. Can you raise your hand if you can't see it? Let's make sure. It might just be a technical difficulty or it might be several. Okay.
Luis is saying he can see the screen. I can see it.
I've got a couple people raising their hands. We can also
can I just make a suggestion? If you can't see it, if you can go up to the menu where it says people and click on that, and it might flip for you, because if you have it selected to people, you're not going to be seeing the presentation.
Yes, ma'am. And one more recommendation, if you can please turn your cameras off and mute yourselves until we call on you to speak. Thank you. Okay, Christine, yes, I'm seeing messages now from people who can see the presentation. Again, if you can turn your cameras off and mute yourselves. Okay, Christine, I think you're okay to go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I want to make sure everybody can see this. Otherwise, there's not much. So glad we can get that fixed. Thank you. So 2024, as I was saying, marks our 4th consecutive year doing the listening sessions. We really felt like, or I felt like when I joined the city, that it was important for us to have an annual touch point that was formal with each council member's district who wanted to opt in. Hasn't been all council members every year. We actually have the largest number of participating council members this year, so that really thrilled about that. And this is, as I said, is just a formal way to get participation and listening touch points. We also show up at Crime Watch meetings, HOAs, resource fairs, city council member events. If there's an event that you have not seen us at that you'd really like OHS to be at, please go ahead and put that in the chat. You can email us. And with a week's notice or 2, sometimes even a day's notice, we can get the proper subject matter expert to your meeting so that we are in the community. So as I said, the focus of this year's information really is to bring information and seek feedback on 3 OHS initiatives, one of which is the bond program, which just passed on May 4th. the Give Responsibly campaign, and the Friends of OHS. Feedback on these listening sessions is extremely important. We compile all of the feedback and we share it with the Citizen Homelessness Commission. Citizen Homelessness Commission is council appointed representatives from the community in every district. We're very lucky to have Citizen Homelessness Commissioner Matt Jacob here with us tonight, who is the appointee for District 12. And they are really the connective tissue between Office of Homeless Solutions and the community. So they are the ones who message to us, you know, what's going on with the community, what's important, what are they seeing, and then bring back the activities that OHS is doing. So if you're not familiar with your CHC commissioner, you know, he's here tonight. He does a great job. So that's awesome. And then of course, we go to the Dallas Area Partnership to End and Prevent Homelessness. That's a public-private coalition that works on homelessness from a slightly different angle. And of course, chair for that is Councilmember Mendelsohn, who is here tonight. And then our council committee that reports up to the Dallas City Council is Housing and Homelessness Solutions. And Councilmember Mendelsohn is also the vice chair on that. So we're in a well-informed room tonight. All right, if we can go to the first slide after this one. Thank you. All right, so for the 2024 bond program, on May 4th, if you voted on that, you know, thank you to everyone who came out and voted. All of the propositions passed, most by a fairly wide margin of approval. For Office of Homeless Solutions, what that meant was $19 million for everything from construction and repair, land purchase for permanent, supportive, and short-term housing for the homeless, to some permanent maintenance repair. Now, why that's broken down the way it is here is because the way that it worked is Office of Homeless Solutions and all the other departments reported to a subcommittee for the bond community task force for about a year, and talked about, every department talked about, you know, kind of their wish list of what they would like to do and how much money that would take. And there were about $2 billion in asks, and the bond is a little over $1 billion. So everybody's asks got shaved down and prioritized. And then the subcommittees gave their recommendation to the Community Bond Task Force, who gave their recommendation to City Council. And then within that recommendation, Office of Homeless Solutions had about $8 million. And so they said, well, what would you do with this $8 million? And we said, okay, well, per our presentations, we know that the Bridge Steps, which is the single adult flagship shelter for the city of Dallas downtown, it's a city-owned building. It's 15 years old. They do a lot of great work, but we need some construction maintenance. And so they need a new generator and an upgraded HVAC. That's 1.8 million. And the rest of the 6.2 million is going to go towards permanent supportive housing gap financing. So we'll get to that in a minute. And then the third tranche, the 11 million, that came from a budget amendment done that gave city council members 5 million in discretionary allocation, and said, okay, take what you have and put it towards the projects that you would like to divide it amongst. And from that, OHS got 11 million. So very thankful for that. That 11 million we don't have anything for, because a lot of that is going to be debated at Housing and Homelessness Solutions at the Horseshoe. Those will be really policy decisions. And I expect that we'll have council guidance asking us to go and look at certain models of maybe different types of housing or projects, and bring back best practices so that council can set those policies. And that's what that money will be used for. And I did see a question, the Bridge as a place. So the Bridge, yes, the Bridge is a single adult shelter downtown. It's operated by the Bridge Steps. And those costs for the generator and HVAC, since those are considered permanent modifications, it's an expense that's fine. Now, you wouldn't be able to like pay a utility bill with this. You wouldn't be able to do that with bond funding. So good question there. But for the gap financing, permanent supportive housing, and of course this could be for other things, but permanent supportive housing is something that we all have. So if you go home at night with a reasonable expectation that you're going to get to stay where you live for as long as you would like, that's permanent housing. Supportive services for, you know, most people, you have a social safety net. You might have friends or family or a spouse or a pet, maybe a therapist, multitude of things. Well, we know that there are a lot of folks who are unsheltered, especially those who've been outside longer, who are older, who are aging in place, who might not really be reasonably expected to become a part of the workforce again. Someone who might be on disability and isn't physically able to do that. So folks who really, really need more than 12 to 24 months of rent to get back on their feet. And for those people, you're looking at permanent supportive housing. So housing that has rent in perpetuity through a voucher from the federal government, and the supportive services that come with that are case management services, sometimes peer support specialists, someone who's been through homelessness and can walk alongside you, and then a whole host of other tertiary services tailored to your needs through your case manager. So that really brings that supportive network to you and make sure that you're going to be able to thrive in housing. And the gap financing part is because you know, we really believe that the best and highest use of public funds moving forward is not to purchase buildings ourselves and then really vertically integrate it. So you purchase it, you renovate it, and then you seek an operator. We have a couple of properties where we are still working on that. And it was the best practice at the time, but it's timely and costly. And so instead, if we can use a much smaller amount of public dollars to leverage a much larger private impact, than a private funding impact, then that's going to take us a lot farther in the community. A good example of these there are 3 St. Jude centers, if you're familiar with those. There's one in District 10 at Vantage Point, one in District 13 at Park Forest, and then one at District 11 on Coit and the LBJ access road. And all of those are permanent supportive housing, but they are permanent supportive housing that's been done by an outside private nonprofit who then came to the city at each iteration and said, hey, I need $3 million to close the financial gap on this property. Vantage Point, they went to housing most recently and got that $3 million to close the gap on purchase price. Well, that nets 136 new permanent supportive housing units for the system. At Park Central, they said, hey, we need 2.5 million in acquisition costs. And that came out of OHS's 2017 Proposition J bond. Later on, they needed 3 million in renovation cost, and that came from OHS. The county also helped with that building. And then you net 200 new permanent supportive housing units for the system. So all of that is a much smaller use of city funding to stretch farther. And with this new funding, and this will be used for new projects, we don't have anything lined up right now, as of course bond money comes in later. It takes some time. But the hope there is that we'll be able to have developers who come and really look at this as a way to add carve-outs of maybe 3 or 4 permanent supportive housing units here and 5 there across the city into their larger build. So that way it's not being concentrated. And it's small bits of money here that guarantee carve-outs. Same as we need market rate, affordable workforce, all different types of housing. You also need more PSH stock. And so that helps build that in incremental ways that doesn't concentrate it. And then in terms of the allocation, as I said, bond funding doesn't all come in at once. We don't get all 19 million tomorrow. It's 3.8 million annually for 5 years. Okay, if we can go to the next slide, we're going to switch gears here and talk about the Give Responsibly campaign. I know I've talked to many of you before about this. It's something that is really, I think, near and dear to my heart. And it really stems from the fact that about 3 years ago, we were tracking that there is so much giving in the community. And as someone who is from Dallas, I love that. I love that we are so focused on how we can give as a community. And there's a huge philanthropic side of Dallas. And I have memories of making sandwiches
Christine, I'm so sorry. I don't want to interrupt, but I do want to make sure we have plenty of time for questions and things that are very specific to District 12. And if we could kind of move along this part as quickly as possible, that would be great.
Sure, yes. And actually, I did say I'd run 20 past, and so we'll wrap it up here a little bit. So with the Give Responsibly campaign, it's talking about, we all have these core memories of making sandwiches or something and helping. But we also want to make sure that we're doing this in a way that helps people out of homelessness or whatever situation they're in, and not helps keep them where they are. And so the Give Responsibly campaign is really talking about how, is really saying, hey, if you're giving to people on the street, whether that's money, funds, clothing, can you instead think about a partner nearby? Maybe it's an organization that aligns with what you were really passionate about, or just a provider in the area who you know does a good job, and make sure that you're giving to them or working with them in a way that is more impactful, and just creating a sustainable way of giving. So if we go to the next slide, we can really look at that in 3 categories. One of the things that we talk about is food and beverage. Part of that is just, it's very easy to hand someone something on the street. And if it's 110 in the shade and someone looks thirsty, hand them a water bottle. By all means, I would do the same. But don't think that that's going to get them housed tomorrow. It's not the same conversation. And so if you can do that in a way that then works with an organization that could come out with you and have that conversation, you've met an immediate need, but you're also meeting a long-term need. Part of that is, when you look at trash, and we get 311 service requests around trash from, different intersections, and we get really mad at seeing that buildup of debris. Well, we also have to ask, whose debris is it? Because I've also been at a stoplight and seen someone drop off 7 boxes of pizza to the intersection. And on Thanksgiving week last year, we collected over 2,700 pounds of litter. And that didn't come from the unsheltered, that came from people dropping things off. And, within a 7-mile radius of downtown, you've got 5 different shelters and day centers who are all providing well-balanced meals. Again, this can create an expectation of something that ties you to the spot. Why would you take the 2-block walk to the shelter to get a well-balanced diet, to get your hair cut, get all the shoes and clothing in the size you need, if you know that you can just stay there and someone will come along with it? Again, funding encourages people to stay where they are. And I met people who, after you get past those initial conversations of, well, I need money, okay, but why? And have that deeper rehumanizing conversation, I've had someone say, well, actually, I have money, but I don't have an ID. So even though you can have all the money that in the world, they couldn't get a hotel room. And so if we'd started with the I need an ID, then I could have gotten you to a place that gets you an ID, also gets you on the path to housing, and now you don't have to worry about that. So it's that immediate and long-term need. We really need to sync them up. Clothing and household items, again, as I said, you can have people who have this mentality of resource scarcity, because when you're on the street, you don't know where the next thing is coming from. So even though you might not have something in your size, you're going to hold on to it. And there's a really great example. There's a guy, Grant Denton, who does a TED Talk about homelessness and street charity, and the inadvertent toxicity of it. He was homeless, and he talks about this woman who was unsheltered with him, who came outside with 2 bags of trash and an igloo cooler. And when 3 months later,
Christine, I'm so sorry. Is it possible to skip the story and just tell what the actual programs are? I think that these are not the issues that we're seeing up here. We don't have a lot of street charity happening. I mean, certainly people will buy a meal and give it to somebody who might be on a corner, but we're not having the issues that downtown is having with large churches setting up for large food or clothing distribution. That's really not a north of 635 issue. It's really a central business district issue. And I think there's a lot of really urgent and important things that people would like to talk about. If it's possible to sort of move through this a little quicker, that would be great.
Sure. And yeah, appreciate that. So again, all of this is to say that, please don't give in that way. It seems like you guys are doing well on that. But we do have a seat at the table event that happens every single month. And we had that feedback because we had people say, well, if you're going to insist on, if you're going to tell us we need to go somewhere, where should we go? And this is not, this is just if you know people who are doing this or who want a place to volunteer, which transitions into our next and last slide around Friends of OHS. You can always come and volunteer with us. The Seat at the Table event is once a month. We provide a sanctioned space for people to come and give in a way that is controlled and has hygiene and security and trash collection. And you can join that, or you can join the Friends of OHS volunteer group through ohsvolunteer@dallas.gov. And this was started in November of 2023, so that we could collect people who were asking, how can we help? And we could direct them towards issues that they were excited about, but also start some of our own meetings as well. So, and if you don't want to do that, you can also just receive our newsletter, which keeps you informed. You can also be a volunteer that way. And so with that, we will go to the last slide. And this is a QR code. So we ask that everybody use this just to talk about, so we can get feedback on the presentation and how we can better serve folks moving forward. And I'm seeing a lot of questions about specific issues. And again, we were here tonight to talk about these overarching issues, but we are happy to get that information for you. And I know that council member, you're really good about ensuring we answer all the questions. So we've got 30 minutes. And if we can't answer the questions, we have them all in the chat so we can get them answered and sent back out.
Okay, so let's kind of go through some of them, if you don't mind.
So, Councilmember, I'm at the top of the chat box, and I was going to read them in the order that they're posted for response.
Okay. That's fine.
Does that work for you? Does that work for you?
It does. I want to, before we do that, let me just hit some that I think are widespread concerns. So first off, Christine, can you address what's happening at Frankfurt in the Tollway, Briar Grove in the Tollway, and Trinity Mills in the Tollway? What are you seeing and what are you able to do about it?
Yes. So in those locations, we are seeing repeat offenders come back, and it's at odd hours, but randomly start setting up very, very noisy, inappropriate things that are unsafe for folks. I've seen people swing a bottle of wine at 9 a.m. I've seen somebody set up a grill. And it's something that we really have to watch because it just happens. Most of the time, there aren't a lot of people there. And then at specific hours or later at night and on the weekends, this develops. So what we are doing, we've had a force of the marshals and our homeless action response team out there multiple times. It is frequently checked so that we are able to go out there on the weekends at a moment's notice. One of the things that we are doing now, though, thanks to some help by the council member and our city manager, is working with NTTA, the Tollway Authority, on how we can do some site hardening and put up some fencing that will look nice, but will also deter people. And yes, the enforcement being done multiple times a day is something that we are out there as often as we can be. But we're also looking at other ways that we can do deterrence, working with transportation and the Office of Integrated Public Safety Solutions. So all three of those locations are where we'll be looking at adding site hardening and enforcement. And then we'll be using that as a model to create a system that we can do along not just NTTA, but also 635.
Okay. So I'm just going to tell the community I met again with NTTA today. Last weekend, I went out with transportation for 3 hours at those 3 specific intersections, looking very closely at utility boxes, what's legal, what's ADA compliant, what's not. Their engineers are developing things that are possible, which then we're going to show NTTA, make sure they're okay with it, and then we're going to come to the community and show it to you. And the reason this is so important, I just want you to know, is that engineers can look at this and come up with a solution that doesn't actually fit the problem. So I'll give you this one example. At Trinity Mills in the Tollway, one of the ideas was to put the concrete barriers in the median, like in between the lanes going east and west. And I'm like, the homeless aren't there. The panhandlers aren't there. That's actually not a problem. It's way too dangerous that even they know not to go there. So when they just look at it on a map, that makes sense. But when you actually drive that intersection all the time, and you have for years, that's not what the problem is. So Having spent time there, we interacted with a number of young people who have a serious addiction issue, who did not want shelter. I talked to them, I offered them shelter. I didn't have a way to give it if they had said yes, but I was pretty confident they would not say yes. And in fact, their answer was it was not in their heart to accept shelter. And that's the two that could speak, and the other two who were so drugged out they couldn't talk. So I firmly believe, and I would love to hear people in the chat say yes or no, that homelessness has changed at our intersection since COVID. I think what we had before COVID was one thing, and I think what we have now is something different. And I think we have two things along the tollway. One is drug addiction and sort of a dropout culture of folks. And second is we have a panhandling racket that is raising money for various things, but it is, I don't think it's a mental health issue. I think it's an enterprise. And so those are the two that I see most frequently. And so let's go to the questions. Gloria, if you want to read it, that'd be great.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. The first question is from Commissioner Jacob. Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, we have a ton, so I appreciate everyone standing by. I was just entering a question. Mr. Jacob's question was basically, Christine, I'm going to the top, about why we are using bond funds to pay for the generator for the bridge that you referenced during your presentation.
Yes, and I saw that question pop up during the presentation, and I said that qualifies as a capital expense because it's a permanent maintenance. It is not a utility bill. It's a one-time expense for something that extends the life of the building.
Thank you. Another question. Okay.
So this next one is a really important question, and it's one that council members have asked repeatedly, and I'm going to go ahead and ask it.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Ms.
I might go ahead and read these and ask them if you don't mind, just because I think I might
go for quicker, it. Absolutely.
Which is, what are you doing for the people who refuse services? So the guy who tells me he doesn't have it in his heart, what are you doing about that?
That is a great question. We've answered that multiple times over the years. We know that most folks just need more service engagement, but there are those who will absolutely refuse. And so what you see there is what we like to call compassionate enforcement, where we are really focused on decommissioning sites for encampments and then keeping them closed, which means nobody else can camp there. We also do emergency closures when we have very unsafe areas, so near schools, weapons discharge. And then we also have cleanings. And cleanings are, I think we've done almost over 500 this past quarter in areas that are hotspots. And that's because, these areas are not public storage and it's not safe for that to happen. So we routinely move people out and we clean. And if you're not going to accept services, then Dallas is not the right place for you.
Okay, but Christine, you can't tell people that you're closing encampments. Let's just say Frankfurt and the Tollway, Gibbons Bridge. I mean, you're going out there and they're returning. Whether you clean it, whether you remove them for a day, 2, 3, 4 days, they're always coming back. So the people want to know what can be done to keep people out. What is the actual enforcement side? You said compassionate enforcement. Where's the enforcement part? I'm unfamiliar with that.
So the enforcement part, as we have said and talked about before, is the marshals come out with us. And if for some reason someone is exhibiting behavior that is belligerent or a danger to others and themselves, they can run warrants and they could be arrested. But honestly, that doesn't solve homelessness. That just wastes taxpayer dollars and they're back the next day. I can also say that, we have most folks in Dallas are from Dallas who are unsheltered, but we do have to look at this from a regionalization standpoint. We have a lot of people that book in through the county and then don't end up necessarily go back to where they were arrested from. So not only does arresting people not solve homelessness, it can inadvertently concentrate it in an area that is not where they came from. So lots of things there.
So what I just want to say is, with enormous kindness and respect, you and I have a very different view of what ought to be done. And, you know, many of the people on the call, I think, know I wrote an op-ed in the Morning News that said we need compassion plus enforcement. For me, enforcement means you literally remove them. What's happened on the city council is we've started discussion and have provided direction to the interim city manager and OHS staff saying, we want to see a proposal for something called sanctioned encampment. Now, that can mean a wide variety of things. What we're talking about is a place where if you are encamped illegally, because in Texas, you are not allowed to camp on public land, we are going to swoop in and say, we are so sorry, but you are not allowed to camp here. Let's help you gather your things because we care about you. And let's help you get somewhere that you're allowed to be. We can take you to a shelter. We can help reconnect you with a family member, no matter where that is, assuming they're willing to accept you. We can get you into mental health or drug addiction treatment, or we can take you to a place you can encamp. And this place, you're going to be checked for weapons. You're going to be allowed to camp in a tent if that's your preference. We're going to have tiny homes with climate control and a lock, so you can bring your items and you'll have a bed and you could be in that tiny home. There'll be a place for bathrooms. There'll be a place for showers. There'll be a place where you can get food, and there'll be services available. Mental health, addiction, physical health, hoping to connect people to housing and other services needed. But this to me is not okay. And if we did that, and I've been jokingly calling it Dallas Hopes. If we have this place called Dallas Hopes, then everybody who's got the very generous heart, instead of giving responsibly campaign, which I do not think is very effective. I don't think because there's a panhandler there, I'm going to get on my app and give $5 or $10. That doesn't make that panhandler go away. And it's never going to make that panhandler go away because they want that money for drugs. So if we have that, everyone's going to know, oh, this is where I can send food. This is where I can send clothing. This is where I can go volunteer. Everybody who's on a corner, hey, you should go to Dallas Hopes. They can help you, including IDs and all the other things. So this is what me and a number of council members are really advocating for, based on all the things we have seen in the years on council. Is this is a solution we think will actually work for our city. It'll also mean we don't have to send out, I don't know, we added 17 caseworkers to go out. Like, that's insane. We can't keep adding, you know, dozens of caseworkers every year. So now they can focus on one area because there won't be 400 homeless encampments everywhere. So I just want you to know there's a difference of opinion. It doesn't mean one's right or wrong, but as a council member, we set policy. We don't get to do the work. Like, if you call me, I'm not going over to Frankfurt and Tollway and picking anybody up and moving them. But it does mean I can be one of 14 council members plus the mayor with a voice in a policy position that changes what our current policy is, which is we don't take them off the street unless they're dangerous to themselves or to others. So I just need to say that because I would say the large portion of this group doesn't support the way Dallas has been handling homelessness and the good things that we've done, which is we've opened a lot of shelters and they're going to open more permanent supportive housing. We've invested very heavily, very, very heavily in homelessness because we're good people. And I do think we have some level of moral responsibility for folks. But on the other hand, it doesn't mean you get to take over a public land. And so this is where we diverge. And I think when I started on council, there was just me. And now there's a whole group, but we're really close to having a majority. I'm not sure if we do. If we do, it's probably an 8-7 split. So I'm just going to say this next election is going to be very important for people, especially outside of District 12. Okay, so let's keep going with the questions. Thank you for your question. Okay, let's see. Refusing support. I think you guys get the answer now. The bums that live here don't want help. It's easier to steal packages and smoke dope. I'll add in putting needles in their arms and necks. Someone says they watch them come into the racetrack at night asking for the throwaways as they camp out. Yeah, well, homeless people are different than panhandlers. We've all been witnessing. This is frustrating. Let's move on. Okay. The solutions are awesome for folks who are willing to accept help and assistance. However, what is the game plan to address folks who don't want it? Okay. What's the game plan to have DPD address and enforce the ongoing drug use in the Frankfurt and Tollway area? Also, what's going to be done to address enforcement of folks who are traveling through the neighborhoods with their stolen grocery baskets? So grocery baskets, I mean, do you guys want to address that?
Well, I can tell you that grocery baskets are not generally reclaimed by the different areas, the different shopping centers, because it is too costly to clean them. So you might see a locking mechanism, but when we have offered to bring them back the shopping carts, they do not want them. So I believe there was a program to reclaim shopping carts a couple of years ago, and it wasn't successful for that reason. But again, when we are cleaning up trash, that's the type of debris that if it's there, it's going to be removed. We also have standing 90-day cleaning orders for a lot of these hotspots, which means that because we have that order, we can just come in at random and clean because we have given you 90 days of notice.
So notice they have to be there for 90 days before they're coming in to clean.
No, it is a notice that is good for 90 days. So we put the notice out, and then for that next 90 days, we can come in and do sporadic cleanings. We use that at hotspots to make sure that we have given notice, but also it's not a place where you can become comfortable. And I would say that the areas around the intersections are all hotspots, not an encampment because people aren't staying consistently. And it's an area that, as you've said, really is not about homelessness. It's more about the criminal activity. And of course, that changes in different areas of the city. Farther north, we really do find that people are there because it's lucrative, which means even if, you know, the people on this call are not handing them funding or something else, someone is, or they would not be there. And in those areas, we are working with enforcement on what we can do, because the farther north you go, it is a very different tenor of the panhandling you see.
Well, I would hope there's nobody on this call that's giving money to panhandlers. However, we have a lot of people in Carrollton and Plano that are. Let's see, I've got Felicity saying she's not giving any more of her tax dollars to this budget better. Somebody wants to talk about District 12. I'm not sure. Kevin, you're asking about a TED Talk. I'm not sure what the TED Talk is. But
Councilmember Christine referenced a TED Talk during the presentation, and I responded to Mr. Winters and asked him to drop his email address or send us an email so that we can send him the link to the TED Talk. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, why don't you send it to me and I'll send it out in the next e-news. There was an arrest last night at Frankfurt and the Tollway for possession of a controlled substance. Let's see. Somebody, Mel, you're putting up enforcement of a law. I'm assuming it's that you're not allowed to, well, I don't know which one that is actually. But I will tell you for the grocery carts, which seems to be a big conversation on Nextdoor right now. I don't think any of our grocery stores have locking mechanisms because we really haven't had this problem before. And number one, you can ask the stores to put them in. And number two, you can ask the stores to go get their carts back. And even if they don't want to use them for shoppers, which I think many of us might appreciate, they can certainly throw it in their own dumpster. So I think as customers, we're going to have a lot of influence on doing that. And I'm certainly happy to send a letter on city letterhead asking all of our grocery stores to please make sure they're doing that. Let's see. I don't know who Baron Perry is. Sorry. You'd rather see property tax?
Remember, Baron Perry is one of our outreach staff, but again, tonight was not about specific issues, so we can definitely send him things if you have a question.
Okay. Someone says they'd rather see property tax and insurance relief for those of us that live here and getting crushed with increases. If the homeless want help, there's help. Homeless here don't want it. That I believe largely is true, not 100%. I wouldn't contribute $1 to this. We pay our bills. Okay. So next one says There sounds like there's many places around downtown for services. Is there any place north of LBJ? So LBJ and Central and Coit, High Five area, that's where there's one big permanent supportive housing initiative that Christine talked about called St. Jude. Dallas County and the city of Dallas put in millions of dollars to help that. And then, of course, there's the Family Gateway in our district. Next one is we're seeing an increase in homelessness at Preston and Frankfort area. Also this week, homeless were at the intersection of Campbell and Preston. What number should we call to report this? Is it 311? Yes, please report to 311. I don't think that the homeless were there. I think those are panhandlers. But if you think they're homeless, please do report. Either way, feel free to report it. Look, they're going to get more creative as there's more people and there's intersections with lots of cars. And what District 12 has are very high traffic streets, and more than any other district. So, you know, if you want to stand at, you know, Frankfurt and the tollway, you're going to have more than 55,000 cars per day drive by you. Pretty good chance you're going to come up with some money. Same thing for Preston. How many homeless people are there? Hi, Tom.
So in terms of homeless folks, we have the state of homelessness address, which I know Councilmember and I differ on in terms of the point in time count. That counts national trends. So along with that, we are at about roughly 3,200, which is a 24% decrease since 2021. We're actually one of the 27% of cities in the nation where it is decreasing. That does not mean that visible homelessness feels like it's decreasing, but visible homelessness is about 29% of overall homelessness. So most folks are in shelters, but when you see people on the street, we have folks who have never been connected to services. We have a lot of people who are averse to services. And as I said, the farther north you go, it really is less homelessness, and it is more criminal activity that likes to sometimes have anonymity in those spots, which is why in certain areas we do utilize DPD and the marshals if we know that there's a suspected, you know, warrant out for something, or that there's an area that needs a search before it's safe for us to go in. But again, overall, we are decreasing. But this particular year, we're going to be focusing on visible homelessness because we know that the tenor is changing for all of the reasons that we've been talking about.
So again, every single council member polled says homelessness is increasing in their district. So this has actually helped galvanize more people to our side, because it's really frustrating when we see it and we hear it and we hear from our constituents. And then you have these agencies telling us that it's decreasing. I mean, there's like 50 people sleeping outside of City Hall. I think it's remarkable that they could even come up and say that, but that's fine. Christine Burke is asking, it's getting very scary when you pull up to the tollway intersections, Frankfurt, Trinity Mills. The homeless are getting very aggressive towards the cars, not to mention how many wrecks are happening. What's the city working on to fix them? So I'll just tell you at Frankfurt, 5 years we've been working on getting the funding for Frankfurt and the tollway southbound. So coming off of George Bush, coming off the tollway, like right in front of Payway. And there's 4 buckets of funding, and I'll put this in the e-news, 2 of them to do with the traffic light and 2 of them to do with the roadway. And we've had 3 of the buckets, and we just got the 4th one approved by COG, and then it'll come to the city council, I don't know, sometime in the next 4 weeks. And once we accept that money, they're doing the design work, and then they'll send it out to bid, and the work will actually begin to fix that intersection, which is in the high entry network. With that, they're going to remove the area where the panhandlers stand. So we're going to kind of do a 2-for-1. The traffic signal will move from the corner to the median on Frankfurt to provide the signal for the southbound lane. I hope that makes sense. It sounds like a good idea, and that's why I was out there with transportation, because there's going to be changes to it, and we're looking at what else can we do, right? The riprap, those rocks, that did work for a while, but now if you notice the homeless who can't seem to work are just lifting those very hard, sharp, heavy boulders, and they're just moving them so that they can walk up and still sleep there and still stand there and panhandle. Please report this to 311 so that they're tracking it, and it's also how they're sending out folks to address it. This one says we have bums and gang wars, can't go out at night, not safe, and it looks filthy. Lovely neighborhood, may as well be Skillman and Abrams. Oh my goodness. Okay, we're not going to answer that one. Yes, please. Okay, so this is about seeing an increase. Yes, report to 311. Marilyn's saying this enforcement needs to be done multiple times a day to all hot spots. Christina's saying the rocks at Frankfurt have just moved them closer to the street. Felicity saying, what does that mean? Elaborate more, please. Okay, I'm sorry, I don't know what you want to elaborate on, so put that in there. Lloyd says he calls 311, but he's told that services are refused. Now what? Well, this is why we have to actually do enforcement. Karen says Marsh and Frankfurt is very dark since Wells Fargo closed, and jaywalking and begging people on corner is very dangerous to people and drivers. I'm afraid I'll hit someone with dark clothing and skin walking in the street. It is dark there. I'm wondering if you could put in a 311 request about the lighting in that area.
So if you send that to us, actually, we are looking at changing out some of the lights under the underpasses to blue LEDs. It's just more annoying if you're sitting there, and studies have shown that it deters folks from doing certain things.
Yeah, this is not an underpass. This is just an intersection of Marsh and Frankfurt. It's adjacent to that Walmart, but there's quite a bit of panhandling there.
Yeah, we can get that followed up on and look at changing out the lights there too.
So Karen's asking if the major accident this week at Frankfurt, the tollway, was caused by individuals crossing the street or distracting the driver. My understanding is there actually wasn't anybody there, but this just goes back to the safety of the intersection. And there was a gas tanker that had a very serious accident, and thank God nobody was killed. Had there been panhandlers, they probably would have been killed. Jason's saying he almost hit them several times. Look, I've got photos, and you know that many of you, I asked you, send me photos, and there's people's head that are literally inches from the street, and it is extremely dangerous for them and terrifying. I mean, I don't ever want to hit anybody. So, okay, the homeless crisis was created in the 60s. Yes. Can we talk more about this? Who here wants to keep listening to the lies? These plans never work. Having to pay more taxes. Yeah. So here's one of the problems. You know, our district has 52,000 people in Collin County, about 28,000 in Denton County, and the remaining 15,000 are in Dallas County. Dallas County has more significant mental health and addiction services than the other two. And, you know, this does become a little bit of a problem. But there really are no mental health services that are inpatient for the folks that are at Frankfurt and the Tollway. Christine mentioned, Joe says, Christine mentioned that they can respond in a moment's notice. What is the appropriate organization to notify?
So I heard someone earlier ask if something could be a 311 call. We actually have a couple different responses. So if you're seeing something that is a danger to the person and others, call 911 and ask for right care. There's a mental health trauma-informed group within 911 that can dispatch to that location. We also have the Homeless Action Response Team, which is made up of Code, Dallas Animal Services, Office of Homeless Solutions, City Marshals, and the non-emergency branch of Right Care, which is Mobile Crisis. And those reports, those calls come to us through departments that are in the field. So it could be DPD, DFR, or it could be the council office. And we have that Monday through Saturday, 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. And we're actually looking now at what it would take to stand up a shift on Sunday with some overtime to have more people in the field. So that's just outside of the normal 311. But if it's an emergency, call 911. If it's something that we need to know about, but it can get resolved in the next 24 to 48 hours, that is a Homeless Action Response or HEART team. And no, there's not a person in charge of panhandlers, but, well, Councilmember, I don't know if you want to talk about the median ordinance.
We passed an ordinance about standing in the median, and I think it will help with that safety issue we talked about. A group that is an advocate for homeless has sued the city, asking the judge to say we can't begin to enforce it. We actually won the right to go ahead and enforce it before they rule on the case. However, we haven't, but we're starting to. And we could get a ruling on the case anytime. That's kind of what's happening. But you know, everything takes a really long time in Dallas, and when you start talking about lawsuits, and we're always going to get sued. No matter what we do about enforcement, we will get sued. And so we just have to do it as logically and in the most caring way possible. And I'll just say, for everyone who's frustrated about like just get people off, I understand that mentality, but I have to tell you, we do that with animals. Like, we don't leave stray animals outside. We bring them into shelter because we care about their health and safety, and we care about people's health and safety. And when you start saying, you know, can I bring you to shelter, and they say no, I'm going to say that person probably doesn't have the capacity to make a decision that's in their own best interest. And that it's not reasonable for somebody to stay outside in a dangerous location. I mean, this isn't Boy Scouts, and they're not equipped like Boy Scouts are. This is very dangerous living, and they are more likely to be victims of crime than even you and I are. And even if you feel frightened by what you're seeing, they're actually more likely to be the victim than you are. And it's homeless on homeless crime. And someone's going to jump them for the money that they've panhandled. And this is just a fact. So their lifespan is reduced when they're unsheltered. And it's compassionate to have enforcement. And that is what we have to get some people's minds wrapped around, because it's not that I'm offended that I see somebody who's homeless. I'm not offended. I'm compelled to act, though. And it's not okay to just drive by, in my opinion. I don't want to hand them money, but I want to make sure they get to a place that they can get back within some sort of range of a normal life and a life of value. And certainly sitting on the edge of a busy intersection is not it. Someone's saying it's a total racket. Barriers are not a solution. What's the action to get the individuals off the street and into help, even if they don't wish to help? Okay, I think we addressed that. Gloria's saying again about that. Theron, hi Theron, is saying that homelessness has changed. He thinks they're money grabbers. Jim is saying he agrees. Homeless at intersections become more aggressive. Kristen's saying the root of our homelessness in the area is addiction and the lack of enforcement. The professional panhandlers are the least of our issues. Theron's asking about the definition of homelessness. Did you want to give that?
Sure. I also want to be mindful of your time, as we're at 8 p.m. already. But the definition of homelessness, there are 4 in Housing and Urban Development Department. That's the federal body that guides us all. And it is couch surfing. So you're not sure where your next residence is going to be within about 7 days. We generally ask for about a 2-week timeline. If you've ever been fleeing domestic violence, you are technically homeless. We also have people who are in shelter or transitional housing and people who are outside. I did see something about migrants in there. So migrants or immigrants don't actually interact with our local homelessness system. We are not equipped to help people who have the various legal needs that those folks might have. And in trying to help them without that expertise, we can actually do more harm than good. So, you know, we do try and offer resources when we have people asking how to help immigrants, but it's really not something our local system is able to handle. So there's actually pretty firm separation there.
Okay, well, Christine, I'm going to spare you all the people who are saying they agree with me, but you can scroll through that and see yourself. What I would like to just end with is this last question is from Matt Jacob, who, by the way, folks, he is your District 12 commissioner on the Homeless Commission and has been doing a fantastic job. I'm very proud of you, Matt, and really appreciate the hard work you've put in, the voice of reason, and caring, but also just common sense. So his question is, there's 400 encampments approximately in the city of Dallas. We've been told there's a strategy to close encampments. What's the timeline for us to do so and to get to a functional zero on encampments? And what does the strategy entail? And what are the public laws enforcing encampments? So it's a couple of questions wrapped together, but I think it's the essence of what many of us are questioning. And so if you can say maybe how many encampments have been closed this year and how we can get to no encampments in Dallas, where this is not something that we tolerate or allow.
Sure. Well, the way that we get to know encampments in Dallas is that we continue to close them. Either it's an emergency closing or we're closing them through housing, which breaks the cycle and doesn't move them into someone else's backyard. And then as we go, we post signage that says the sites have been closed, and we add them to a list that we have that we do weekly closure maintenance on with the marshals, who can then legally move people along from these sites once they're closed. And we get to a point where we are so fast at housing people that the second we see anybody outside, we say, you can't be here, because we know that we can house them, which is where we are getting that's functional zero, is to be able to house anyone we find within 90 days. Now, in terms of a map, and Commissioner Jacobs, I know we talked about that at the last Citizen Homelessness Commission as well. And as I said then, the closest thing we have is a rolling service request map, 311 map in GIS. I'm not sure where 400 came from. Maybe that was 400 requests. But I will say that some of the requests are redundant and it reflects what people can see. So, and that changes day by day. The weather can change where people are. So it's less of
so the 400 comes from our calling, which is doing the mapping by GIS location.
Mm-hmm. So again, GIS location, which is great. And if you look at that, I'd encourage you to look at that day to day. It changes so frequently. This is not a static issue. So really, we're looking at the overall population and addressing people where we find them. And that way, instead of saying, oh, well, we'll get to this encampment eventually, we have bi-quadrant outreach paired with enforcement, which we're working on having a stronger arm of, that can really get out and address people in that quadrant and get them on a pathway to housing or whatever it is they need, so that not everyone is waiting on the same one resource.
Okay, so we're at 8:05. I do want to say the initiative that I'm talking about, which again, I just started calling it Hope Dallas because of a funny joke that is not related to that, but like, we hope Dallas will do this, right? So it is something that I'm one of several council members pushing for, and I hope that you are subscribed to the e-news. I will probably put something in there asking you to help advocate for this. So whether that's signing up at a council meeting saying we need something like this plan, because what we can't do, in my opinion, which again, respectfully to Christine, we have just different opinions about this. What you're hearing the staff position is that the way to close the encampment is to give somebody housing. And what the housing looks like today is a year of rapid rehousing, which is a free program for a year. 100% of your bills are paid, electricity, your utilities, and your rent for a year. We can't afford to house even the inaccurate point in time count number. I don't know what they're saying now, 3,200, whatever the number is. We can't afford to do that. We just can't. And I mean, I'll tell you that one of my young men's sons said, "Are you kidding me? A year of free housing?" He's like, "I'll go get my tent." He's an Eagle Scout. "I'll go get my tent. I'll go camp out, annoy some people with loud music, and they'll call. And you're telling me a homeless worker will come out to see me and ask me if I would like free housing for a year? Hell yeah, I would." And so I'm like, no, you're not doing that. But he's a smart kid. I bet a lot of other people could figure that out too. If people understood, all you have to do is present as homeless, you're going to get free housing for a year, there'll be infinity people lined up. This is not a sustainable kind of program. So all that to say, I do think we have a winning strategy with this type of sanctioned encampment. There are other kinds of sanctions encampment that I think would be objectionable to people, where you literally are just shoved to a piece of land and good luck, right? That's not what we're actually talking about. And so I hope you'll join me in supporting that. There's probably other solutions that would work. It is not the preferred solution by HUD, I will tell you, and definitely not the preferred solution by the local professionals called the continuum of care. But it is what I have seen that I think would actually solve this issue. There's multiple pieces of land that are possible for this. It won't surprise you to know that none of them are in District 12 because we essentially have no land. Everything is built out, and we also don't have other ancillary services. So this would be something that would be closer to downtown, but not in downtown. And when you start thinking about all the police and the marshals and the outreach workers and all the other services where we're going out to people that are spread out over 384 square miles, you could imagine having people all go to one place brings an efficiency that we've never seen here. And I hope that would reduce crime. I hope that would reduce calls for EMS services as we send people out on welfare checks. I mean, I just think there's incredible things that we could do if we put people together and let them have a supportive community and move out of that terrible stage of their life into independence and dignity and health. So this is what I'm advocating for. I don't want to take over the listening session, but I do hope that you will, Christine and Gloria, read the rest of the comments, because if you do, I think you're going to get some ideas about what the opinions are for District 12. And I hope that you'll join us and help us make this a reality, whether it's because you believe it or because the council directs it. But again, okay, anybody listening, feel free to email us, let us know what you think. I appreciate you. I appreciate y'all coming. It's 10 after 8. We said we'd end at 8. So I know that staff has had a very long day and they've been doing this for, I think, 2 weeks now. So really appreciate you. I do. And I appreciate you coming out, knowing that District 12 has a lot of opinions, but we need help. Like, it's not okay what's happening. And so thank you again. Thanks to everybody who stayed on this meeting. I will tell you, I took a screenshot of how many participants we had. At one point we had 100, and that's not including presenters. And so, Christine, I don't know if you add up all the people you've had at all the meetings, was it 100?
I'm not sure, but you know, as I said, I think District 12 wins hands down for the most people.
Yeah. So I just think it goes to people's need to tell you what a problem we're having and how unsatisfied we are with really the direction of how it's being handled. Like we'd like something different. And so thank you for listening, and I hope that will be incorporated in policy.
Okay, well, everyone have a great night, and thank you so much for coming out. We appreciate it. Thank you once again, Council Member, for sharing your district with us tonight.
Thank you. Y'all have a great night. Appreciate you.